Here, in China's Qinghai province, lies the Gonghe Talatan Solar Park, the largest of its kind on Earth. It is a sea of glass and silicon sprawling towards the horizon, a project on a scale so vast that at full capacity it could power the entire nation of Norway. And it is not alone. Across the immense deserts of China, a new landscape is emerging, etched with colossal solar and wind projects. The world's 3 largest solar plants and its 3 largest wind farms are all found here. The figures are staggering. In the year 2024 alone, China invested $940 billion in clean energy technology, a sum greater than the entire gross domestic product of Poland and only just shy of the world's total investment in fossil fuels. Last year, China was responsible for 64% of all new renewable energy capacity added across the globe. It produced 70% of all electric vehicles sold anywhere in the world. This is the material reality of a grand strategy, a vision known as Made in China 2025. A nation is in the process of fundamentally transforming not only its own economy, but the global economic order. But how was this achieved? Is this a story of victory or of a game played by different rules? And in an era of rising protectionism and tariffs, what does it mean for the world? The origins of this new industrial revolution lie more than 40 years in the past, in the shadow of Chairman Mao Zedong's death. Mao remains a towering icon in China, yet his economic legacy is one of profound and devastating contradictions. His bid to rapidly industrialize the country, the Great Leap Forward, launched in 1958, was a catastrophe. The mass collectivization of farms, immense and misdirected investment in heavy industry, and the fatal inefficiencies of central planning backfired with spectacular cruelty. A famine followed, claiming the lives of between 15 and 55 million people. When Mao died in 1976, he left behind an impoverished, largely agrarian nation, still fractured by the political chaos of the Cultural Revolution. His successor was a man he had purged and exiled, Deng Xiaoping, who rose to power in 1978. After the carnage of the Mao years, Deng saw the absolute necessity of profound economic reform. He sought to unwind the rigid ideology that had defined Mao's China, encapsulated in his pragmatic philosophy. It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. Under the banner of reform and opening up, Deng initiated a gradual economic liberalization throughout the 1980s. Markets, not the state, began to set prices. The country opened its doors to foreign investment. Entrepreneurs were, for the first time, allowed to build private businesses. As these reforms took hold through the 1990s, China's economic growth began to accelerate. Between 1980 and the year 2000, its GDP per capita grew 5-fold, a surge fueled by the ceaseless hum of factories exporting their goods to foreign shores. The seeds of a global superpower had been sown, waiting for a new century to truly blossom. In the twilight of the 20th century, Beijing, acting on the counsel of Singapore's visionary leader Lee Kuan Yew, embarked on a radical experiment. It designated pockets of its coastline as special economic zones, islands of capitalism in a sea of state control, designed to lure foreign investment with the promise of preferential taxes and incentives. Of these zones, one would become legend, a once tranquil fishing village bordering Hong Kong, known as Shenzhen. Through the 1990s, Shenzhen underwent a violent metamorphosis. It became a boom town, a magnet for the hopes of a generation. Thousands upon thousands of workers journeyed from the vast rural interior, a human tide drawn to the glow of its new factories. Here, they produced the small components of a globalizing world: pens, clothes, watch batteries. Among them was a young man named Wang Chuanfu. He was born into poverty in the central province of Anhui, one of 8 children. Yet, through sheer determination, he had excelled in school, earning a place to study chemistry at a university in neighboring Henan. Upon graduating, he followed the path of so many others to Shenzhen, joining a fledgling battery company. Just 2 years later, he left to found his own. His vision was simple: to build affordable, rechargeable batteries for a world on the move. He named his company Yadi Electronics, after the street where its modest operations began. The story of Wang and his company would become a microcosm for the story of modern China itself. In the 1990s, Chinese manufacturing possessed one overwhelming advantage: wages so low they were almost gravitational. In 1995, China's gross domestic product per capita was just over $600. In South Korea, it was more than $12,000. In Japan, a staggering $44,000. This colossal disparity in labor cost, the established advanced production lines, were no match for this new economic reality. Business was not just booming, it was explosive. By the year 2000, Yadi Electronics had become the world's largest manufacturer of mobile phone batteries. In 2002, Wang took the company public on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, raising over $200 million and cementing his status as one of China's premier capitalist entrepreneurs. By then, the company had adopted a name that would soon echo around the globe: BYD. This individual success was mirrored by the nation's own dramatic ascent. Throughout the 2000s, under the leadership of Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, China's economic engine roared. The defining moment came in 2001, when the nation joined the World Trade Organization. This accession tore down the final barriers, granting Chinese goods unprecedented access to global markets. In return, China committed to liberalizing its own economy. The results were world-altering. In the 10 years that followed, China's GDP per capita surged 5-fold. Merchandise exports, once a small fraction of its economy, jumped to account for around 60% of its GDP by 2007. A deluge of low-cost Chinese goods flooded into foreign markets, and the nation began to accumulate vast trade surpluses with the rest of the world. The culmination of this relentless rise arrived in 2010. On the back of its export-led miracle, China officially surpassed Japan to become the world's second-largest economy. The quiet fishing village had become a global titan, and the dreams of a poor boy from Anhui had become the destiny of a nation, forever redrawing the map of global power. For all its burgeoning might, the Chinese export economy was a behemoth built on humble foundations, a vast, sprawling workshop for the world, but one defined by the rhythm of labor-intensive, low-end manufacturing. But in the southern metropolis of Shenzhen, a different kind of ambition was taking root. A battery maker named Wang Chuanfu had steered his company BYD into the turbulent waters of the auto industry. He acquired a struggling car company, betting not on the gasoline engine of the past, but on the electric promise of the future. Yet, on the world stage, this was a whisper against a roar. In the year 2010, BYD was a mere footnote, ranked just 26th in global vehicle production. The automotive landscape was an unassailable fortress, its ramparts defended by the legacy giants of America, Germany, and Japan. A profound irony was taking shape across the nation. While Chinese factories churned out the solar panels that would power a greener world elsewhere, their own skies were choked with the past. In 2010, a staggering 80% of the nation's electricity was generated by burning coal. 4 decades after Deng Xiaoping opened the doors to the world, China was unrecognizable, a global manufacturing hub, yet one shackled to a model of cheap exports. Within BYD, Wang Chuanfu declared an audacious goal: to become the world's largest car producer by 2025. At the time, it seemed a distant fantasy. The nation's economic engine was still fueled by low technology, high pollution industries, reliant on other countries for the most advanced products. If China was to become a true superpower, this had to change. This was the reality that President Xi Jinping inherited in 2012. For his China dream to be realized, the very foundation of the economy had to be remade. The response came in 2015, a state-led strategy of immense ambition, titled Made in China 2025. It was a blueprint born from a stark self-assessment. The document declared China's manufacturing industry large but not strong, critically lacking in innovation and dangerously dependent on foreign nations for core technologies. It then laid out a new map to the future, identifying the key strategic sectors that would define the next century: robotics, aerospace, biotechnology, and at the heart of it all, electric vehicles and renewable energy. It was a clear directive for the state to marshal its resources behind the modern industries of tomorrow. A decade later, the consequences of that directive are reshaping the global order. China now dominates the world's clean energy supply chain. In just the first 5 months of a single year, the nation installed 244 gigawatts of new solar and wind capacity, a figure so vast it is difficult to comprehend, equivalent to installing more than 100 solar panels every second, enough new power to electrify the entire nation of Indonesia. The distant hopes of the past have solidified into a new reality. Names once unknown outside China, Longyi Solar, Goldwind, are now world-class titans of technology and cost. And BYD, the company that once ranked a lowly 26th, is now the third largest automobile brand on the planet. It is a tectonic shift executed with breathtaking speed, a testament to what can be achieved when the will of a state is focused on a singular technological horizon. The future, it seems, does not simply arrive. It is manufactured piece by piece on an unprecedented scale. A seismic shift is underway. In the world's largest auto market, the electric vehicle has dethroned its gasoline-powered predecessor. And this is not merely a domestic revolution. It is a blueprint for global industrial supremacy. 80% of the world's solar panels, 60% of its wind turbines, and a staggering 90% of its lithium batteries now originate from a single industrial heartland. The vanguard of this expansion, automotive giant BYD, is planting its flag across continents, from Brazil to Hungary, Thailand to Turkey, forging localized supply chains for a new electric age. The economic consequence of this strategy is monumental, a trade surplus approaching $1 trillion. The conclusion is inescapable. In the great industrial arms race of the 21st century, a clear victor is emerging. But this meteoric rise was not born of market forces alone. It was engineered, meticulously crafted from the very top. Chinese technology companies, now among the most competitive on earth, were forged in the crucible of state support. In 2019 alone, the most recent year with reliable data, the government injected $400 billion into its industrial engine. This support is a complex architecture of state intervention. The most visible pillar is the direct subsidy. Purchase incentives for electric vehicles, introduced as early as 2009, were only phased out nationally in 2022. Paid directly to the producer, the average subsidy fell from around $2,700 per vehicle in 2010 to $1,500 in its final year. Yet the aggregate sum surged, reaching a colossal $5 billion in 2022. Between 2018 and 2022, BYD alone received $3.7 billion in government aid, with $2.2 billion arriving in the final year. In the wind sector, manufacturing titans Goldwing and Mingyang each received more than $160 million during the same period. Beyond direct cash, the state reshaped the energy market itself. For years, renewable power plants enjoyed preferential pricing, a nationwide system paying them more per unit of electricity than their coal-fired rivals. While this national program has ended, similar schemes endure in powerful provinces. The support network runs deeper still, comprising around 22% of all industrial spending. Tax incentives fuel research and development. Land is provided at a fraction of its market value, and crucial input costs are managed by the state. Earlier this year, the powerhouse province of Jiangsu slashed industrial power prices by 9%, a direct intervention to protect the margins of local industry. But even these measures are dwarfed by the most potent tool in the state's arsenal, the provision of cheap, state-directed loans. This is not simply a story of economic competition. It is a fundamental challenge to the established order, a fusion of state power and corporate ambition on a scale never before witnessed. What we are seeing is the construction of a new paradigm, one that redefines the relationship between nation and industry, forcing the world to question the very principles that have governed global trade for a generation. At the heart of China's industrial strategy lies a powerful, centralized financial system. State-owned banks control 60% of all assets in the sector, a vast reservoir of capital, directed not by the cold calculus of risk and return, but by the strategic priorities of the government itself. In recent years, a seismic shift was engineered. As the old engine of property development began to falter, central bank data reveals a surge of new lending, deliberately channeled into the nation's high-end manufacturing sector. But the financial leverage extends far beyond the banks into mechanisms of support almost unparalleled in the modern world. The sheer scale of state-owned enterprises allows them to act as guaranteed first customers, using bulk procurement to nurture an industry's fragile beginnings. In 2011, the electric vehicle maker BYD received the world's largest public tender for electric buses, not from a private firm, but from the Shenzhen government. When direct support is not enough, government-owned investment vehicles step in, acting as state-sponsored venture capitalists. In 2020, when the pioneering EV producer NIO was on the brink of collapse, the city government of Hefei directed its local funds to acquire a 24% stake for $1 billion, a state-led bailout that secured the company's future. The result is an industrial ecosystem operating under a different set of laws. Costs are systematically suppressed. Rent is lower, the tax burden is lighter, borrowing is cheaper, and a massive domestic market provides subsidized demand. Consider the electric vehicle industry. Between 2009 and 2017, it received an estimated $61 billion in government support. 80% of this came as direct subsidies and tax exemptions. 12% was government procurement. Another 3% was dedicated to research grants and infrastructure. By 2018, this state support covered roughly 23% of the cost of a new vehicle, a discount of $13,000, underwritten by the state. This is the foundation of the Made in China strategy, a system of massive cradle-to-grave state support. The consequences are now being felt across the globe as China's dominance of the renewable supply chain becomes one of the most volatile issues in international trade. A deluge of low-cost Chinese exports, solar panels, electric vehicles, wind turbines has reshaped global markets, prompting calls for tariffs and protectionist measures. In 2024, the United States Treasury Secretary issued a stark warning that Chinese overcapacity risked decimating American industry. Since 2017, Chinese exports of solar panels have increased sevenfold, while their average price has collapsed by more than 60%. Beijing's response is one of simple economics. Their industries, they argue, are merely more competitive. They point out that other nations subsidize their own strategic sectors, noting, for instance, the generous tax credits that benefit. This is undeniably true, yet it sidesteps the fundamental difference in scale and structure. The world is now witnessing a collision not just of companies or products, but of two profoundly different economic models, forcing a global reevaluation of what it truly means to compete on a level playing field. Two fundamental distinctions separate Beijing's model of industrial support from the rest of the world. The first is a matter of sheer, almost unimaginable scale. In the year 2019, China's spending on industrial support reached 1.7% of its gross domestic product, a figure that more than doubles the level of support in South Korea and quadruples the relative amount seen in Germany or the United States. But the second distinction is more profound. It is a philosophy etched into the very architecture of its economy, a development model built not on demand, but on supply. And from this, a new phenomenon emerges: overcapacity. For decades, the nation's vast resources have been channeled not towards its households, but into its productive capacity. Instead of building extensive social welfare or allowing the incomes of its workers to rise in step with productivity, the focus has been relentless investment in roads, airports, and high-speed rail, in industrial might and foundational research, all lubricated by a currency kept deliberately weak, a tool to sell this immense capacity to the world. The consequences are twofold. On one side, production costs plummet at every stage of the supply chain. For an electric vehicle maker, it is not merely the final assembly that is subsidized, it is the entire ecosystem. The tires, the windshields, the plastics, all are forged in a crucible of low-cost, state-supported domestic production. On the other side of the ledger, the Chinese consumer saves more and spends less. By 2023, consumption accounted for a mere 40% of China's GDP, starkly below the global average of 57%. The nation was engineered to produce far more than it could ever consume. The numbers tell a story of profound imbalance. China, responsible for 32% of global manufacturing, yet accounting for only 12% of global consumption. Consider the solar industry. In 2023 alone, China built enough capacity to produce 861 gigawatts of solar modules. The staggering reality? Global demand for that entire year was less than half that amount. This deluge of supply inevitably pushes prices to the floor. It becomes a bitter victory. Chinese factories, facing crushing domestic competition and limited demand at home, begin to lose money. The share prices of the nation's renewable energy giants have fallen into a deep and protracted slump. The conflict, then, is not a simple zero-sum game between China and the world. It is not a contest of who can offer a larger subsidy. It is a collision of economic philosophies. The true challenge lies in the fundamental structure of an economy built to supply a world that may no longer be able to absorb its output. This is a reality forged over decades, a force of economic gravity that no tariff nor any amount of heated rhetoric can easily defy. The economic calculus is unambiguous. Beijing has engineered a system that prizes one objective above all others: industrial capacity. This dominance, particularly on the new energy frontier, was not born of chance. It is a creation of the state, directed, subsidized, and supported at every conceivable turn. The result is a new generation of world-class innovative titans, capable of producing at a scale and cost their foreign rivals can barely comprehend. Yet this very efficiency, insulated from the raw discipline of market forces, has unleashed a torrent. Chinese factories now produce on such a colossal scale that profitability becomes elusive, not only for competitors abroad, but for many of the companies at home. Herein lies the root of the great economic schism, the fundamental conflict over trade that now defines relations between China and the West. But to focus solely on the fairness of this industrial strategy, on the friction of overcapacity, is perhaps to miss the most critical consequence of all. Out of this crucible, China now delivers a deluge of affordable, high-quality, renewable technology to the world. This may be a formidable challenge for established Western manufacturers, and a bitter reality for countless loss-making Chinese firms. But it is an undeniable boon for the global consumer. And most profoundly, it is a powerful accelerant for a planet in crisis. Electric vehicles, solar panels, the very building blocks of a sustainable future, are suddenly within reach for millions more. And so, the world is faced with a defining paradox. Does the origin of the solution matter more than the solution itself? An old Chinese aphorism asks if it matters whether a cat is black or white, so long as it catches the mouse. In the 21st century, the mouse is climate change. The question that remains is whether a world saved by the industrial might of a single, dominant power is the world we are prepared to accept